Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Council of State Governments' third webinar in our series in recognition of the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, Getting Ready for Work, Youth Transition, and Guideposts for Success. I'm Sydney Geiger, a policy analyst at the Council of State Governments and team member of the CAPE Youth team. This past July 26th marked the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the most comprehensive disability rights legislation in history. Over the past 30 years, the ADA and comparable state non-discrimination legislation have resulted in significant improvements to education, public accommodations, independent and community living, and employment to individuals with disabilities. To celebrate this legislation, the Council of State Governments, in partnership with the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy, is hosting a 6-part webinar series. We're so excited to have you today. So along with policymakers, industry experts, and leaders in the field, we will discuss a variety of policies and programs that can enhance disability employment policy in your state. States have played a critical role in these improvements, but we still have a long way to go to achieve full equality for individuals with disabilities. Today's webinar, more specifically, will cover how state policymakers can work to ensure that youth and young adults with disabilities are receiving high-quality supports, services, and opportunities that they need to successfully transfer from secondary education into employment or higher education. The Center for Advancing Policy on Employment for Youth, also known as CAPE Youth, will premiere our newest publication, the Guideposts for Success Framework for the Future. I would like to thank the Council of State Governments National Chair, Representative Joan Ballweg, Deputy Assistant Secretary Jennifer Sheehy, and our incredible panel of speakers and our fantastic partners at ODEP, CAPE Youth, as well as the State Exchange on Employment and Disability, and the Cornell Yang-Tan Institute on Employment and Disability, who have all made this webinar possible. Before I get started, I want to draw your attention to a few housekeeping items. If we can go on to the next slide. All right, so as we get that slide up, I will go ahead and share that after the webinar, it will be available to view on our website with the transcript and the slides. They will be accessible in a PDF format on our website at seed.csg.org under the ADA 30 tab. And then throughout the presentation, if you have any questions for our panelists or in general, you can submit them through the chat feature. And if you are having any technical difficulties or if you have a question about Zoom, you can use the chat feature to type a question and a CSG staff person will get back with you as soon as possible. We do have closed captioning available. And as soon as we get that PowerPoint slide up, there will be a link. We will also send the link in the chat as well. And to reduce noise during the conversation, we ask that you silence anything. We have all participants muted during the webinar, and we ask that you please turn off your camera. That will help our technology work smoothly. All right, great. Looks like we have the PowerPoint back up, and there is that closed captioning link. Again, that will be in the chat, as well as the link there, which is where the recording will be after the webinar. All right, without further delay, let's go ahead and get started. We will start with some opening remarks. We are honored this morning to have a couple special guests providing opening remarks. First and foremost, we have the U.S. Department of Labor Office of Disability Employment Policy Deputy Assistant Secretary Jennifer Sheehy. The mission of ODEP is to develop policy that increases job opportunities for youth and young adults with disabilities. In 2016, Deputy Assistant Secretary Jennifer Sheehy was appointed by the President to the Ability One Commission. Prior to her current position, she spent 10 years at the U.S. Department of Education in various roles, including acting as the Director of the National Institute on Disability and Rehabilitation Research, Acting Deputy Commissioner on Rehabilitation Services Administration, and Special Assistant to the Assistant Secretary of Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services. Jennifer came to the Department of Education from the Presidential Task Force on Employment of Adults with Disabilities, where she was a senior policy advisor and served a detail as Associate Director in the White House Domestic Policy Council. So we are so honored to have Deputy Assistant Secretary Sheehy here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm going to pass it over to you to say a few words.
Thank you so much. And Sydney, this is terrific. I've been looking forward to this release and this webinar for a long time. Our Office of Disability Employment Policy was created in 2001 because there was a need to coordinate the multiple programs and services and policies that help ensure success for people with disabilities. We believe it's super important, especially to help young people with disabilities launch meaningful and successful careers. The Guideposts was a policy framework that our office, ODEP, introduced with its grantee back then, the National Collaborative for Workforce Development for Youth, in 2005. So it's a little overdue that we needed to update this given everything that has transpired in the policy arena since then. And now we're really, really excited that CSG and your state members are leading this work for us, because
Deputy Assistant Secretary Sheehy, it sounds like you are frozen for us. Maybe try disabling your camera and muting and unmuting, that may help. We'll give her just a second to see if she can reconnect to audio. And if not, we will move on. All right, looks like we will have her join back in here in just a second once we get her audio going, but we will go ahead and move on. Next, I would like to introduce CSG's incredible National Chair, Representative Joan Ballweg, to provide some opening remarks. First elected to the Wisconsin Assembly in 2004, Representative Ballweg is the current chair of the Joint Committee for Review of Administrative Rules, chair of the Speaker's Task Force on Suicide Prevention, the vice chair of the Committee on Licensing Reform, and co-chair of the Joint Committee for Review of Administrative Rules. Her legislative service comes after 10 years of being both a business and civic leader in South Central Wisconsin. She's been a passionate advocate for children and young adults and has dedicated much of her career to policy surrounding youths, including work on early childhood development, education, and suicide prevention, among other issues. So please join me in welcoming CSG National Chair, Representative Joan Ballweg.
Thank you, Sydney. So can you hear me all right?
Yes, you sound great.
Okay, thanks. Well, first of all, I want to extend my appreciation to you, Sydney, and the CSG team for working on this particular project to move it forward. I really do appreciate the partnership that you have with the U.S. Department of Labor, and looking forward to hearing the rest of Assistant Secretary Sheehy's remarks on what the importance is making this happen. I think we're going to have to rethink a little bit of this and reflect how, as our economy comes back, that we don't leave these folks behind. I think we had been doing a wonderful job in trying to move forward in bringing everyone into our economy, and I'm afraid that this segment of our population might be left behind as we try to get into our post-COVID economy. So thank you for bringing this entire idea forward and keeping it alive. I do know that transitioning from high school to employment in our post-secondary education is stressful and a challenging time for all youth, especially those youth with disabilities. And I appreciate that we're going to learn today from today's webinar what youth with disabilities on average have lower educational attainment levels and are less likely to be employed than peers without disabilities. So youth with disabilities benefit from high quality transition services that better educate, give them better education and employment opportunities, thus successful and happy lives throughout their lives. Now, this webinar today will explain 5 evidence-based interventions that will ensure the comprehensive delivery of programs and services for youth with disabilities. And by supporting youth transition, states can strengthen their economies, increase opportunities of employment, and create a more inclusive workforce, which in the end makes all our society a better, more welcoming place for all citizens, and no matter who they are and what their physical capabilities may be in life. So thank you again for this opportunity. Please encourage for anyone who is on the webinar to share this once they are on recordings, and promote it throughout your connections so that even more people are available to see this program. I know that the Council of State Governments has worked very hard to make sure that we are moving forward with programming for all our constituents in legislatures and states throughout the United States, and make sure that these opportunities are vibrant and flexible for all of us to participate in. So with that, we'll go back to Sydney, and hopefully we can hear from Deputy Assistant Sheehy. And thank you all for participating, and thank you very much for our experts that are going to be providing this information on the webinar today.
Thank you so much, Representative Ballweg. Really appreciate that, and appreciate you taking the time to join us. I know how busy you must be right now, but that you are continuing to prioritize this issue is very appreciated. And we will be hearing from ODEP later on in the webinar. So we will be hearing from Kirk Liu, who will kind of wrap up what Assistant Secretary Sheehy was saying. But next, I would like to go on and introduce our moderator for this afternoon, Andrew Carhan. He is one of our great partners. Andrew and his team at the Cornell Yangtan Institute are one of the critical partners in ODEP's new initiative, the Center for Advancing Policy on Employment for Youth, also known as CAPE Youth. Andrew has over 20 years of experience in the field of vocational rehabilitation. He has administrated employment service programs for individuals with disabilities and provided technical assistance on the implementation of best practices in employment services across the country. Most recently, Andrew has centered his work on the implementation of cross-systems initiatives, including the development of the New York Employment Services System. Andrew also provided leadership to the New York State Promise Initiative, which was funded through the U.S. Department of Education, and fostered the vision and leadership for a statewide administrative employment network under the Social Security Administration's Ticket to Work program. His resume is very impressive, and we are very excited to work closely with him and to have him as our moderator this morning. So thank you so much for joining us, Andrew, and I will pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Sydney, for that nice overview. It's always humbling to hear somebody introduce you like that. And I'm like, is that really me? So I'm glad to be here and glad to be partnering with CSG and ODEP on this initiative. This is really a critical time and a critical juncture in our nation's history. And I think it's particularly a critical time for youth and young adults with disabilities. What we wanted to spend a little bit of time today talking about before we get into our overall group discussion is to really highlight the guideposts for success and a new iteration and a new sort of lens on that particular topic. The guidepost, next slide, actually goes back to 2005. It was originally published under the National Collaborative of Workforce and Disability for Youth, NCW Youth, as most people would know it, in partnership with the National Alliance for Secondary Education and Transition. The overall focus at that time was really one that was very global, and it looked to provide a framework and a design for quality programming for youth and young adults with disabilities across a broad spectrum of systems. And it aimed to really target a broad variety of audiences, whether it would be individuals and youth with disabilities themselves, parents, family members, caregivers, as well as policymakers, as well as state-level administrators. It was really out there to set a true framework and guideposts for everyone in those categories to be collectively looking at a shared vision of these are the components, these are the things that we need to be thinking about as we're designing supports and services for youth and young adults with disabilities. These are the necessary components. Next slide. As I had indicated, it really does have that broad implication. It crosses over secondary and post-secondary education. It looks at career technical education. It brings in and has implications for our vocational rehabilitation system, for our mental health services systems, for our developmental disability service systems, and other health services and social services across our country. The reality is that within each state, there are a variety of configurations on how these particular entities are designed and set up. There is some similarity across our country in how those things are designed, but depending upon where certain agencies may sit, those connections and the policies that connect some of these components may be different. They may not be as strong as the neighboring state next to them, and vice versa. There may be something that's stronger in the neighboring state that isn't quite as strong in your own personal state, in particularly related to some of the cross coordination that we know is necessary. Next slide. What we recognized and what we really focused on with the guideposts in this iteration was saying, you know, we recognize that there's this broad implication and there's this broad use for what is contained in the guideposts in its current rendition. But what we recognize is that we really wanted to speak into what policymakers could do at the state level, at the local level, as well as the national level, to ensure that the guideposts truly become a reality. And so, you know, the idea with the guideposts is that strong public policy should include a variety of things. One, it should always look to increase opportunities for youth and young adults with disabilities that are transitioning into adulthood. That at the forefront, as you're thinking about it, it should always be about how can we create better and more streamlined opportunities. You know, there are opportunities out there, but some of the opportunities are not as easily accessed as we might want to create the kind of outcomes that we all hope to have for youth and young adults. We want to ensure that youth have access to post-secondary education and training programs that lead to competitive integrated employment. This competitive integrated employment is a critical notion. It is one that was highlighted in the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. It's truly it has been for a while now that this has been the lens that we've been focused on. WIOA in 2014 truly said, all right, the spotlight now comes on. We are now moving away from segregated employment options. We are looking at competitive, integrated employment opportunities for individuals in our community. And all post-secondary education and training programs really need to be focused in pushing towards that. Helping individuals move into that competitive workplace environment, into meeting the standards of what employers need. We also know that public policy should require systems of support to coordinate all youth transition related programs and services. We know that WIOA went a long way in creating a catalyst for that to happen. We also know that there are a lot of things that need to still happen at the state level, at the local level, to ensure that the vision of that legislation truly is captured, agreed upon at the local level, and then implemented in the way that it was intended. You know, the vision can be there, as we all know. A vision can often be there, but if it's not completely embodied in the hearts and minds of the people that are implementing it, and they don't fully understand what that vision looks like or what it needs to look like, there's going to be barriers. There's going to be roadblocks towards that. Nevertheless, that is our goal. We want to ensure that we are moving in that direction and that there is the cross coordination of those services as we move forward. Next slide. Public policy should also establish state and local priorities related to transition age youth. I think one of the things that I've noticed in my time in my career is you definitely will see pockets of where particularly transition age youth and youth with disabilities is definitely a priority. In other locales, you may not see that happen. They may be a little bit behind in terms of their ability to implement what the vision of WIOA or other local initiatives are. They may just fully not be there yet. And we understand that, that's okay. But the idea is that we establish local and state priorities that match up with what the federal expectations are and what this overall vision is. We know that the Guidepost is based upon many years of strong evidence-based research that backs up what the Guidepost put forth. So we know that there's a lot of reasoning behind it and truth in the fact that this is the direction in which we should be moving, but we know that again, that implementation stage at the state and local level is often difficult. State policy should also look at providing leadership with data that will help inform decision-making process. One thing that I can truly appreciate is the need for data at the federal level, at the state level, to truly make decisions around the impact of the funding, but to truly say, all right, well, we know that this funding is leading to good outcomes, but you need good data to prove that. And there are a number of federal initiatives, some that are funded through other federal agencies like RSA to help VR programs with technical assistance in their tracking of data. There's other technical assistance centers like our Cape Youth Center that are also helping in that way, but really helping states utilize that data to make decisions around how to direct their funding, particularly in these times where fiscal resources are ever so tight and are going to be tightening because of the impact of COVID-19 on our economy and coming out of this recession. We know that state dollars are going to be of the premium, and we're going to need to really inform how to use those state dollars really carefully, but you want to make sure that the data that's there is truly what's driving it to lead us towards the best expenditure for the dollars that we do have. And finally, the Guideposts say that we need policy that is going to have an evaluation framework, that anything that we put into place, that we're evaluating it, that we're evaluating the impact not only on the community, but the alignment with those particular programs with evidence-based practice, that everything is based upon that. Not that we can't try new things, we should be trying new things. If people have creative ideas, we most certainly should be trying those creative ideas, but also recognize that there's a lot of strength in both the successes and failures that we've had along the way in our public policy and the delivery delivery of those programs where we've recognized, you know, we thought we had it right and maybe we didn't have these components right. We need to go back to the drawing board. There's a lot of knowledge and wisdom in that, and we need to learn on that and try new things while still ensuring that we maintain the components of the evidence-based practices as we move forward. So what are these guideposts? Next slide. There are 5 key domains of guideposts for the framework for the future. One is that we need to have strong school-based preparatory experiences. I'm going to go into all these in detail. Number 2 is career preparation and work-based learning experiences for youth. 3 is youth development and leadership. 4 is connecting activities. And 5 is family involvement and supports. So let's go dive in a little bit and talk a little bit about the the school-based preparatory experiences. We know that schools are certainly under a unique challenge right now as students are coming back into school buildings, some partly, some not at all, depending upon which state and locale you live in. The approach may be different. But that doesn't take away from the need for those school-based experiences to be rigorous, relevant, and inclusive. One thing that we particularly want to see right now in this environment is to ensure that youth with disabilities are not lost, that they still have a rigorous and inclusive academic and programmatic experience within their local school district. And you know, that does not come without its challenges. We recognize that this time has caused a significant amount of challenges within a variety of our systems, and the school systems are not alone in those challenges. We think that it's also critically important to align this in that learning with the local industry needs. For example, you know, are the career technical education programs that are available to youth, are they aligning with the local labor market information that is available in that region? Are, for example, students even in this time, are they able to access those career technical education environments in this way and do that in the same kind of way that they would have done if those career technical education experiences are hands-on? Are they able to do that in a virtual environment and still get the value? The answer to that is no. You know, so finding creative ways to still build skills in some of those really hands-on career paths for youth is something that we still need to figure out. And we need to do that, like this slide says, in a safe and supportive environment. You know, safety, obviously, of all of our students and all of our youth, it comes first. And so thinking about how do you do that in this environment is very critical. Even post-COVID, when we come out of this, these principles still apply. How do we provide the most effective educational environment with effective educators that's going to lead to good outcomes that move into that post-secondary world for youth? Next slide. The next component is one that certainly is near and dear to my heart. It's where I've spent a lot of my time in my career. It's around this idea of career preparation and work-based learning experiences. It is critical that students and young adults with disabilities have the opportunity to have diverse and exploratory experiences in real work environments as early as possible in the transition age, to get them engaged in working experiences, to learn what they like, what they don't like, all of the things that are critical, but to build those critical skills. We also know that there should be an emphasis here that those experiences should be based upon the student's strengths. One significant challenge that still exists in many pockets of our system is a fallback to the deficit-based thinking of eligibility for particular services. And we recognize that some of the components associated with making an individual eligible for whether it's our VR services or for our special education services or for our developmental disability services or mental health services, they're all based upon some level of a deficit or a need that an individual is coming to the table with. We recognize that that's there, but once that determination has been made, we need to quickly switch that and say, all right, we've got that procedural component. off the table. Let's move towards talking about strengths. What are the strengths that this student, young adult with a disability bring to the table that are going to be able to be capitalized upon, not only now in their work-based learning experiences, but also leading to a productive career or post-secondary education environment. It's critical that we all collectively maintain that as we're designing programs. We also know that these need to intersect, as I said, with particular skill building and trade-specific opportunities that are local in the local labor market. And that they need to work around some of those school and academic schedules to make those things happen, to be creative and create opportunities for youth. Next slide. I think you skipped one. Or no, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm off. So youth development and leadership. Youth clearly are our future, and that was one of the mantras that we led with in the redesign of our guideposts, and it's in the new title of Guideposts for Success Framework for the Future. As youth are truly our future, this is the foundational principle that should be guiding the thinking of all of us as leaders now, to create a pathway for the next group of leaders as we come forward. We recognize that leadership can be defined in a variety of ways. And, you know, I've spent time certainly researching and looking at this topic of leadership throughout my career. And, you know, there are probably more definitions to what good leadership is than there are people on this webinar now. You know, we each would likely, if you asked what leadership was, we define it in a slightly different way. But I think one thing that many people can agree upon, that there is a level of influence that comes with leadership. And sometimes that influence is really, really positive, and sometimes that influence can be bad. We know that you know, leadership can influence in negative ways as well. One can argue, well, is that really leadership? But it is a matter of influence. And what we want to create is opportunities for youth to lead, and youth with disabilities to lead. We know that many of our systems have hidden biases within them that automatically preclude opportunities for youth and young adults with disabilities to have the opportunity to lead. And we need to identify ways to create those opportunities, to bring those biases to the forefront, and eliminate those barriers so that youth truly see that they have an option and an ability to lead, and can develop those leadership skills through self-determination, self-advocacy, and social skills. Next slide. And the final component, or second to final, is the connecting activities. We know connecting activities are critically important. One national project that I worked on, and I've seen some of my colleagues logging on here, they've also worked on the initiative, the Promise Initiative. What we learned in that initiative was there truly is a need for these connecting activities. We often referred back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and while we know that there's some faulty logic in Maslow's complete thinking, we also recognize that there is some basis to truth to what was proposed in his model, that basic needs truly need to be adequately met before people are ready to move into opportunities or have the opportunity to engage and be thinking about a different future of employment and post-secondary environments. We recognize that there's a lot of complexities. There's intersectionality of a variety of things that may be happening in a youth and a young adult's life. There may be trauma. There may be other family issues. There may be crises that are happening on a daily basis that when you walk into a youth's home and say, hey, I want to help you find a job, they may be dealing with issues around needing to help the family get food on the table, needing to get the power turned back on, needing to deal with a family illness that suddenly came on, or an unfortunate death that happened in the family, whatever it might be. We all have those social pressures, but we know that individuals that are living in marginalized populations have a variety of other barriers that some of us that are going through our daily lives, we do not have those barriers. We don't have the ability to even, quite honestly, conceptualize what it may be like to live a life with those barriers, and understanding the intersectionality of those, and connecting activities to the right mental health, the financial literacy, the benefits planning. All of those components are just so critical to this discussion, and we need to ensure our policies have that. Finally, last slide, is family engagement. Families are a critical component, and I think now more than ever, we really need to be looking at how do we create environments where our services and our service delivery system are looking at family. And I define family in a very broad sense. This isn't just a biological thing here. This is about all of the supports that we know come into a youth and young adult's lives. It may be an individual, a foster care family. It may be their biological parents. It may be an aunt, uncle. It may be a neighbor. Whoever that youth defines as their family, we know that there needs to be a family systems approach to understand what all those dynamics that I referred to in the connecting activities, how they're playing into the individual's life, and what that impact is. And what happens in that family happens in the life of the student. And that environment is impacting them every single day. And we really need to ensure that whatever programs and policies that we put forward are multi-level layered in their service delivery approaches. And that we include mentoring, not just for the youth, but for the families, to ensure that there's a high level of involvement in school, a high level of supporting self-determination, of engagement with that family, of creating a cultural change and a belief that there could be a different future for the youth and young adult that might have been for the family members that are supporting them. And I think that's just a really powerful message that we need to drive home as the final component of the framework. So now we're going to shift gears and have a little bit of discussion with our panelists. I'm really excited to be joined by a group of esteemed colleagues. I will introduce first Representative Josh Cutler. He's currently serving in his 4th term in the Massachusetts House of Representatives. He currently serves as Vice Chairman of the Joint Committee on Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities. He graduated from Skidmore College with a BA in Political Science and a Juris Doctorate from Suffolk University Law School. More recently, he completed his master's degree in public policy from UMass Dartmouth. Also joining me is Director Keith Ozels, and he's the Director of Vocational Rehabilitation in the state of Oregon. He has been with DHS for 8 years. Keith previously served as the Workforce and Youth Manager for Voc Rehabilitation, overseeing and expanding programs related to workforce engagement, benefits planning, the Oregon Ticket to Work program, and multiple transition programs for students with disabilities. Before joining DHS, Keith was the Executive Director of Insight, a Portland-based nonprofit that provides educational and employment services for people with disabilities. Finally, joining me today is Brandy Boyer-Rutherford, completed her bachelor's degree in psychology with Florida State University, and went on to complete her master's degree from Troy State University in counseling and psychology. Brandy's path to transition includes work experience in the classroom as a guidance counselor and as a youth minister. Brandy has been with the Florida Division of Vocational Rehabilitation for more than 11 years, starting as a counselor, then a senior counselor, and as most recently, the state's program administration on transition services for the agency. I just want to welcome all of you. Thank you for joining us today. And we will be starting off today's discussion by having a series of questions initially for each of you. And we'll be starting with Representative Cutler here in a moment. And then we'll move on to some group discussion. So I'll jump right into the discussion with Representative Cutler. Representative Cutler, you've served as the Vice Chair on the Joint Committee on Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities. Could you just tell us a little bit about what the committee has done and why you feel it's so important to the state of Massachusetts.
Sure. Well, thank you, Andrew. Welcome, everyone. It's great to be here. And I'm glad you emphasized just a little bit, because I could probably talk for a long time about what our committee does. It has a pretty wide swath of policy area, including child welfare, homelessness, adoption and foster care, juvenile justice, public welfare, and of course, disability rights and for children and adults with physical, developmental, and intellectual disabilities. So we cover a lot of stuff. We have a great Chairwoman Kay Khan on the House side, and a lot of bills, and for me it's been fantastic. This is my first term serving on this committee. I wasn't sure what it would be like when I was first appointed by the Speaker, and so pleased to have been given this honor of this role. It's allowed me to really take a deep dive on the issue before us today about employment for persons with disability. We've formed a particular subcommittee called the Workforce Development for Persons with Disability, called Workability for short. It sounds a little easier to roll off the tongue. And so we've taken a deep dive this term on this issue of the intersection of employment and persons with disability. And I look forward to talking kind of more in depth about that. But certainly I've learned a lot, and hopefully can share some of that with our folks today. So thank you for having me on. And I think you're muted. I've done that too myself.
If you would like, yeah, and having two mutes doesn't help. If you'd like, how about if you can just dive a little bit into the initiatives and legislation that you have been engaged in with your committee, and to follow that up, what do you think are some of the good ways and best ways to ensure that policymakers are aware of the needs of individuals with disabilities, in particular youth and young adults with disabilities?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we have. There's a lot of folks listening in. One of our folks is someone that I've worked with, a commissioner for the blind in Massachusetts. Commissioner D'Arcangelo, I know, is joining us, and he's someone we've worked with along with a lot of other stakeholders across the Commonwealth. And I like to say, in Massachusetts, I know we have people from all over the country here, and hopefully some who hail from maybe sunnier states than Massachusetts. But we're not blessed in my state with the best weather necessarily. Or ample gold reserves or oil or other natural resources. We like to say our strength is our people. It's our skilled workforce, and that's really what powers the Massachusetts economy. And obviously we can't, COVID aside, we can't afford to let anybody, leaving anyone on the sidelines. Before COVID happened, the biggest concern I always heard from employers was it was so hard to find, train, and retain qualified employees. And so when we have this pool of employees that aren't being utilized to their full extent, we need to do everything we can as policymakers to kind of close that gap and take away those hurdles to ensure that people with disabilities of all sorts can have opportunities and succeed and flourish in a variety of employment scenarios. And so that's our focus here. The Workability Committee has been meeting throughout the last 2 years. I think we've had 40 different stakeholder meetings with other government agencies, the nonprofit space, and obviously a lot of businesses. And I think that's maybe one lesson I would share with everyone that I would just come back to again and again and again, is that it's great to hire folks with different disabilities, but what I hear from employers is the business case for hiring people with disabilities is a strong one. It's not just for charity. It's not just because it's a good thing to do, the humanitarian thing to do. It's because it makes smart business sense. And I think that's the key thing that we need to get across to other employers who maybe haven't come to that realization yet, is that it just makes smart business sense. And you can, talk to, a big Fortune 500 company, or you can talk to the local gas station in my own district that hires lots of folks with different disabilities. And when I talk to him, he tells me it's a moneymaker for him. He's hiring employees who are happy and enjoy the work that they're doing. He's saving money on employee retention costs. He has higher customer loyalty than some of his competitors. All the people in the community that recognize that he's been a good employer, participate and shop at his stores. And so it really has helped his bottom line. And obviously, it's not just the only reason he's doing it, but I think it's important that we look at that, and when we're talking to business people, that we do spread that gospel, the message that the business case for hiring people with disabilities is so strong, and I think more people need to hear that message, and that will help translate, to youth, especially transitioning into employment from school, and doing more with pipeline from school to employment in terms of internships and other things. So that's probably the biggest thing I would say, Andrew, and obviously a lot more. I'll stop here and let you answer some other questions, but I think that's really important to stress to everybody.
Sure, sure. Yeah, no, I can appreciate that sentiment. I think, there is a certain amount of, spreading that gospel, so to speak, of getting the word out, having key leaders like yourself that are leading that are sharing the message, that businesses are also sharing that message. One of the things that I think has been strong across our country and in many of our states is the Disability Initiative, used formerly called the Business Leadership Networks, where it's a business peer-to-peer discussion around inclusivity and hiring people with disabilities. And, there's a lot of strength in that of business leaders standing up saying, hey, yes, this is what we need. This is what our expectations are. Help us get what we need in order to meet our needs so that we can have the qualified and strong workforce that we want. So there's a lot of strength.
One other quick follow-up point. I think, awareness is really, I think, such an important factor here. Myself, I'll give you a quick example. When we had an intern in my State House office who joined us this term, and she was in a wheelchair, and she had some difficulty getting through part of our office the way the desks were set up, and literally in the door. And it's something that, shame on me, I never thought of it. And it made me realize and be aware that I need to do a better job of accommodation and finding ways to make sure we're being as inclusive as we can. And I think for a lot of my colleagues, it's the same. Just the level of awareness on some of these issues isn't as universal as we want it to be. And so whatever we can do to make folks more aware and to break down those barriers and literally, try to bring more people with different disabilities to literally intern and work at the State House, in State Houses across the nation, I think will help influence policymakers to make sure that they're being more aware of their decisions and how their actions can help to foster a more inclusive workplace.
Okay, great. Final question for you in this segment. What kind of resources do you feel policymakers need to assist you all in identifying and working on improving employment outcomes for youth with disabilities?
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, Andrew. Data is really important. Obviously, having robust data, and we know just from experience that sometimes not everybody wants to disclose that they have a disability, and self-disclosure. Trying to find ways to measure that so we can get an accurate count. We're in Massachusetts. We've passed model employer legislation, and we're trying to expand on that. We're also trying to do more with contracting and use our procurement power to go give out contracts to private sector companies that have a certain number of folks with disabilities and in all different diverse employee pool, but trying to create those kinds of incentives. And obviously that only works if we have some measure of data in terms of the numbers of folks with different disabilities in the workplace, both in the government and the private sector. So I think that's really a big important thing, data. And also coming back to just what I just said, which is awareness, just trying to make sure we have a broader acceptance and awareness throughout government. And I think I would just say finally, I think we can learn a lot from the private sector. That's one thing I've noticed, is that the private sector in many cases is doing this better than us, and I think we have lots of things we can learn. I think certainly that's a lesson that I've taken from the 2 years that we've been looking into this in Massachusetts.
Sure. Yeah, the one other thing I wanted to just touch on with you, I was aware that you sponsored a House Bill 2990 around the authorization of people with intellectual disabilities, autism spectrum disorders, related to gaining their driver's license. We know that transportation is a critical issue. I think it's going to be even more of a critical issue, particularly as some of the public transportation systems have been significantly impacted by COVID and people's unwillingness or just trepidation about using public transportation in this kind of time. Can you talk a little bit about your thought process behind that? What led up to it? And are there other things that you've got sort of in the pipeline that you're maybe thinking around that might be just food for thought for other policymakers to be thinking about?
Absolutely. Transportation, when you ask what are the hurdles, what are the issues for folks, the cliff effect is definitely something. Benefits management, And then transportation is probably the issue that comes up the most often. We see that in my own district in Massachusetts. It's more of a suburban area down south of Boston, and so we don't have a great, robust public transportation system. And so, it's an even bigger challenge around here. And obviously, with COVID, public transportation is a challenge everywhere. One of the things that's been done in my area, which I think is pretty innovative, is there's a pilot program that's been done with the ride-sharing service, actually with Lyft, and I know there's other ones with Uber. Ride-sharing programs with a consortium of disability advocates in the region, and basically they have a concierge service so that they can manage this and manage some of the the safety issues that sometimes are raised with such a program, and that's been great. And we're trying to work now to expand that kind of program and encourage that in other areas of the state, because it's only really our urban areas that have significant public transportation options. So these kind of pilot programs through Uber and Lyft, I think, are really important, and that's a big thing that I hear frequently. Transportation, and just to your question in terms of driver's licenses, one of the things that we're trying to do, and this was a constituent of mine who came to me with this idea. Full credit to her. A concern, she had a son with autism and was concerned because sometimes when he's pulled over while driving for some reason, there may not be an awareness of his communication issues, and so that could lead to unfortunate outcomes. And so having a way to easily allow him to identify that, hey, he is someone who has autism and there may be some communication issues. And so she had suggested a voluntary designation on a driver's license, that if a parent or an individual wanted to do that voluntarily, of course, they could do that, so that there was a recognition, whether it's someone in law enforcement or just any kind of interaction with a public official, that, hey, this person may have some communication challenges, and just please factor that in so that there's no misunderstanding. So that's a piece of legislation that we're working on currently in Massachusetts.
Okay, great. That sounds very interesting, and I agree with you. I'm aware of the Uber Lyft connection around Boston, and sort of creating sort of the last mile connections to get people into public transportation, and how that private-public partnership really can work when it's built well. So the critical component there, and the critical phase is when it's built well. I think there's a lot of components, and there's been some pros and cons that have happened in a variety of different communities across the country in relationship to those types of arrangements. But it's definitely, for me, it's one of those things, there's food for thought. There might be some really good pros. Let's build on those, and then look at where it may have fallen through the cracks and figure out how to fix those and create a real good option for people. So it's great to hear about those creative things happen in Massachusetts. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for your leadership. So I will change gears. We'll move over and spend a little bit of time with Director Rosals now. Give Representative Cutler a break here. And so Director Rosals, Oregon has some innovative summer work programs. Can you share a little bit about the SWIFT program, the Summer Work Internship Program? What do participants in the program learn? What types of careers do they typically move into? And is there a dorm living option to this program, and what does that look like? So if you could just jump into what the SWIFT program is about, that would be great, Keith.
Sure, thanks, Andrew, and thank you for having me here today. I'm really glad to be part of this conversation. So the SWIFT program, that Summer Work Internship for Transition, is a program that works with students who experience disabilities while they're in high school, usually in their junior to senior year, and they are working with our VR program in our programs that are partnering with the school districts. And we have an application process where they will be applying to be part of this program, which is a 7 to 8 week residential program that's based in Portland, Oregon. And that residential program is where students from all over the state in very urban settings and other rural settings throughout the state can come to Portland, and they live at a dorm setting at the Portland University, and they are engaged in work activities. So that work that we do with them leading up to the residential setting is we're doing a lot of that sort of that school-based preparatory experience that you had talked about earlier in the Guideposts to Success, and being able to identify career interest in areas of that labor market research, getting them prepared with some of the other activities they're going to engage in when they come and live at Portland State University. For one of those things that they do is they develop a bank account. So sometimes they have to actually get a bank account so they can work on that financial literacy, because they're going to be paid in their work experience, and we want them to get the experience of making deposits, how to manage their funds and their accounts. And we get them ready for this experience. Then when they do leave the school setting, this is a great opportunity in the summer for them to engage in those work-based learning experiences. And that's really coordinating with school staff, parents and families, and really utilizing that free time that individuals have in the summer so they can experience that work-based learning experience. And when they come to Portland, what we do is we have interviewed them, and we've done a lot of their own kind of career interest surveys, and we're able to place them in a multiple array of different job sites. And we've had individuals work with county positions in other cities in the Portland metro area. We've had them be able to work in a natural food store. We've had somebody work in a photo gallery where they were actually taking portrait photos. And then we've also had individuals in dog grooming because they were really interested in animals. So we really try to have a placement with the individual's identified interests, so they're able to experience that and be able to have that real life experience in that job. And in addition to that work, what we do is we have all of the sort of other activities, those connecting activities that you talked about, and being able to make sure that they'll be successful in this setting. So when they're at the dorms, we have travel training set up so they can get from the dorms to their work site. So we work with them in the weeks beforehand to help them in that orientation and travel training, in preparing them for that work experience so they can do that independently. We also, we do some nutritional training because they're actually managing their budget. They're going out and purchasing food at a grocery store, coming back to the dorms and preparing that food. So we actually have something that's like Iron Chef, where the students are learning how to prepare their food, how to eat healthy, how to sort of independently live, and how to take care of themselves. So those are some of the services and the ways that we get them prepared for this. Now, you had the question about what type of jobs do they usually go into? And the amazing thing is that more times than not, the host job site actually want to offer them a job at the end of the summer. They see that return on investment that Representative Cutler said, that there's that business case that people who are, people who come to the job and experience disabilities, there is such a benefit. And when our employers, when they see that, it sort of breaks down that myth of that it is a humanitarian or it's just a good thing to do. They actually see that sometimes our students that we're working with are the most punctual, they show up, they're the most eager to work, they're the most curious about the jobs. So many times we have had job offers come right out of the end of the summer in their internship. And many times they will actually go back to their home community because they've got one more year of their high school career to finish. And then after that, they will go on to a similar job after that. So that's some just general information about this program, and we're very excited about being able to roll it out. We had to take a pause this summer, unfortunately, because of COVID-19. But what we did is we just shifted gears, right? So we did something kind of like there's that Blue Apron where they send you a box of goods. Well, we actually did that with all of the students that were in the program. We sent them all of the materials they were going to need, and we helped them in their community situation, in their own home communities. We were able to work with them. So we even did it in this virtual setting, but we're hoping in the summer of 2021, we'll be able to start our program up again in earnest.
Right. Yeah, that's great, and I really appreciate the fact that you guys have really built it upon the principles of the Guideposts. I mean, I think that theme really shows through, and it's always encouraging to see that as you see somebody implementing and using those, that truly the best practices do lead to better outcomes for people. You see this engagement by the business community, success by the youth that are engaged in the program. I tell you, I love Oregon. You know that. I want to be on the SWIFT program next summer. I could spend 7 weeks there in a heartbeat. So I'll come out and do a site visit maybe, because it sounds like a tremendous program and a tremendous opportunity for the youth and young adults. It's great work.
Yeah, Andrew, let me even tie in one more piece about that family engagement, because many times
Yeah.
families, this is the first time their child has left their home, and we have some participants where their hometown does not even have an escalator, and now they're going to be living on the 7th floor of a dormitory taking public transportation. So we engage families in that, and we have families come to the orientation. We walk them through the process, and that way they're more in a position to support their child in this experience. So that's another point that I missed. It's really important.
Yeah, and that's a critical one. That's almost the most encouraging thing, and I'm sure that's a challenge when you are pulling students from all over your state. To bring them in and do that kind of engagement. It really is critical, though, to making sure that some of those things that you're working on will be brought back to their home community, that it'll work for their family unit, and turn into a longer term outcome for them. So that's encouraging. So building upon that, you want to talk a little bit about the Camp LEAD, the Leadership Empowerment Advocacy and Development Program, and how these benefit the state of Oregon.
Sure. So with SWIFT, we talked a lot about a very urban setting, right? Individuals coming from all over the state coming to an urban setting. Well, we know that individuals have a wide interest in different types of work. So we thought about, well, how could we create a program for our students who experience disabilities who want to work more in a forestry or in the natural resources realm? So we shifted in the state of Oregon, where we were able to have individuals from all over the state come and actually live in the park setting. So they're living in tents, and they're working with the parks and park rangers to develop experiences around interpretive skills. So other individuals around the state who experience disabilities can come into parks. So that includes, we created some universal design and accessibility. We've also touched on these pre-employment transition services that are a requirement of VR agencies around the country now. And there are 5 of those services that we provide to those students. So that's career exploration, counseling on post-secondary education. It is some of those soft skills and being able to function in a work setting, self-advocacy, and then there was that actual on-the-job training. So they're actually working alongside park rangers and others who don't experience disabilities to be able to have that different type of work. If they want to work in the woods, if they want to work outdoors. Oregon is a very large state. We've got many forests out here. And so that is another industry. So going back to that labor market research, we wanted to make sure we had opportunities for students in an urban setting, but then also students in this more sort of forestry or natural resources. So that's another way that we've been able to create some exposure and diversity for experiences for the students in our state.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of lessons there in your guys' approach, particularly around thinking around the diversity aspect. Oregon's not unlike a lot of other states that have a variety of different regions. I mean, I think of even just New York State, the state that I'm in, obviously we have the huge metropolitan center of New York City, but there's also components of New York that are very remote, and thinking creatively, how do you create the same kind of opportunities or different opportunities in those areas in comparison to what you do in New York City is really something to be thinking about. And there are a lot of other states that I think can be also thinking, oh, well, yeah, there's creative things we can do that are going to meet the needs in multiple types of environments and geographies to create those opportunities. So it's encouraging to hear that. One final program we want to hear a little bit about is your youth YTP, the Youth Transition Program. Can you just talk a little bit about what that provides to youth in your state and what's comprised of it and how does that work?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And sort of in the spirit of this webinar, sort of highlighting 30 years of the ADA, our Youth Transition Program is turning 30 years old this year as well. And it has grown over those 30 years. It started with about 7 school districts, and now we are working with 120 school districts around the state in this partnership between our VR program and then local school districts. And we actually have our state education agency on our advisory board to that. So it is a very close-knit community and an inner working community where we have our state Department of Education, our local school districts and our VR program coordinating on those services and being able to deliver these VR and work-related services. I touched a little bit on those pre-employment transition services, and those are some of the core services that we're providing through this program. We're just doing it year-round. So we do it during the school year while we're actually engaged with students in their normal school year, but then we take advantage of that summertime to be able to create work experiences in their communities so they don't have to participate in one of these residential programs that we've created. They can just do day programs where they can work in their communities and get that hands-on experience. And so this program, some of the really good outcomes from this is that 75% of the students that are participating in YTP, they're exiting the program and going on to employment and post-secondary education. And so those students, they're really thinking about that. And it's this upstream theory and really being able to prepare them and to build up the expectations and showing them that this is a reality for them. They can go on to higher education. They can go on to a training program. They can work. And we've seen that there's a lot of evidence that shows that if students have experience in work before they leave the high school setting, they're going to be more successful after that in that post-secondary outcome. So this program is something that it has been around for a long time. We've been able to adapt it to the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act that you mentioned before, and really to utilize a lot of those key domains from the Guideposts for Success, because that really is the North Star to be able to help students with disabilities think about their future and embrace the fact that they are part of our communities. They can be successful with the appropriate supports, and VR, school districts, and other community partners, when we come together, we can facilitate that success for them. So it's a program we're very proud of, and we're looking forward to hopefully expanding even more to all school districts in Oregon in the very near future.
Great. That sounds wonderful. Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's an array of good options for youth, which I think, the Guidepost certainly gets behind. There needs to be options. It's not a one size fits all thing at all. Having multiple options for youth is really a critical component. So we'll give you a rest, and we'll now move over and chat a little bit with Brandy Boyer-Rutherford from the Florida VR. Brandy, I'm going to dive right in. We understand that Florida VR has a very unique program that aligns well with the Guidepost model. It's the VR Youth Peer Mentoring. It's a time-limited self-advocacy training service where your mentor works closely with an age-appropriate mentor and teaches them through one-on-one relationships. Can you talk a little bit more about this for the audience? Talk about what that mentorship entails. What does it look like, the critical components, and how does it tie into employment opportunities?
Well, as we all know, when looking at employment opportunities, it comes down to who you know and how you get there. So we have, through our peer mentoring process, we're working with having students with disabilities peered with a like age, like you were saying, within about 6 years, mentor who can help that individual, that student, navigate the next steps and identifying the areas that they should be not interested in, but going into pursuing and looking at different options for community resources and networking and making those connections that are vital to any individual, but specifically for our students with disabilities. We do it on multiple age ranges. So we have our students that are younger, in high school, maybe 9th or 10th graders, but we also have our students who are college age, working on making sure that those networked relationships are being established, that these individuals are accessing all of the routes that they need to set forth their pathway. And it's a fantastic program. We have 43 providers that coordinate these services across the state. And of course, those providers have multiple mentors, and they're constantly making good matches with the students that we refer to them. And they are helping these students be involved in the community, helping them to access all of the, well, like I said, resources, but also having their voice heard and making sure that they're have the ability to get where they want to go, and letting them see where they want to go. So it's really a fantastic program, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, and there's a significant piece of the self-advocacy training that's built into that, right? You know, yeah. How does that work? You know, what does that look like? What are the components of that?
Well, one of the biggest parts of transitioning to an adult, to the real world, as they say, is understanding who you are, what your needs are, what your goals are, and how to get there. And when you do a one-on-one relationship with someone who has been where you are or similar, it's helps you to see where that mentor maybe ran into some road bumps and how they resolved them, and helping the student smooth the pathway to get where they're looking to go. It truly is about building up the individual's self-confidence and giving them a guided experience as to how to make the next step.
Right. Yeah, and that's so critical. I mean, it plays into the leadership development components that we talk about. And, you know, not everybody is necessarily going to be a leader of 12,000, 15,000 people, you know, leading even in your own life, and leading with your strengths and understanding your strengths and empowering youth to be able to do that is such a critical component. And, you know, self-advocacy and that type of training is really critical in helping youth find that voice that sometimes gets hidden. Whether you're a youth with a disability or not, that youth voice can get hidden, and you know, finding ways to encourage that and build that so that they can lead from a point of strength in their own life is really a critical component. So it's great to hear that. From those components of mentoring and that self-advocacy training, what kind of employment outcomes have you seen through this in these types of programs? Well,
with all things, we are looking all things transition. We're looking more of on a longitudinal range. So we work with students from the age of 14 up to 22 and beyond, depending on their needs and abilities. So we have a lot of things that stretch out over a long period of time. But I will say that most of our individuals who participate in these services are, they go on to be successfully employed. They go on to doing those post-secondary training. So, you know, your technical schools or your colleges, those certificates, they go on to make their place in the world and be heard. And I would imagine, not imagine, but I know that a lot of these students go on to become mentors themselves, bringing the next, those behind them just a little bit forward. The employment outcome, obviously, is going to be our end goal. It's always our end goal. And these students, as was pointed out before, any time that they have the opportunity to engage in these employment related services, they're increasing their odds of becoming employed. And I would I know that these students are all successful, because our goal is both literally employment, but it's also that independence and that self-sufficiency outcome that we're really moving towards. And that is our mission. We are there, we're doing it, we're improving every day on how to help students be the best versions of themselves. We're fostering those independent skills, those soft skills that every employer wants. And not only are we looking at immediate short-term employment, but we're looking at long-term career employment. And that is, it's priceless. It's priceless for anybody, but it's for our students with disabilities, reaching that step that they didn't realize they knew they could get.
Yeah.
Yes, fuzzies.
Yeah. I think it gives us all that same feeling, recognizing that, you've helped a youth and a young adult meet that goal and recognize something that they may not have seen in themselves just a few years prior. It's a powerful testimony. So thank you. It's a good segue into our next phase. We're going to have some open questions to all of you, but before we do that, I'll give you guys all a little bit of a break while we poll our audience on a question. What type of youth and employment program policy are you most interested in implementing in your state? So we'll give our speakers a moment to pause. They can all grab a drink of water, and we'll then dive into a few more questions here while the poll goes. See that number going up. Lots of people voting. Okay, it looks like we have shared the results with all of you. No drum roll needed. The career preparation work-based learning is the winner in terms of what it seems this audience is most interested in terms of learning more about, which is certainly good food for thought for all of us as we think about tools that we will develop under the Cape Youth Initiative with our partners at ODEP. To be focused on that, certainly other federal partners and even those that are working at the state level. It's good to know that the career-based, work-based learning is what's on a lot of people's minds right now. And then you can also see there's that tie of youth development and family engagement. So developing strong leaders and then engaging families on how to do that. So it's great to see that. So given our guideposts of the school-based preparatory experiences, career prep and work-based learning, youth development, leadership, connecting activities, and family engagement, I just want to put this question out to our speakers again. What have you seen to be the most successful in your state in improving outcomes? And do you have things planned as you're moving forward? So I'll throw it out to the group to see what might be there. You have other things planned that are coming down the pike?
Andrew, I'll take a stab at this one. So what we found in Oregon, one of the most beneficial things is that that coordination with our local communities, because right now, more so than ever, we are all in financial strained environments. We're probably going to have some budget cuts around the country, and so we need to do more, and we can do more when we're working together and in coordination. So we're not duplicating our services, but we're actually supporting each other to the same shared goals. So I think that we benefit, VR, we benefit so much when we can work at the local community with our local school districts, with our employers, other community-based organizations. But then you have to have sort of the layers that are supporting that going up to the state Department of Education. And I just wanted to point out that earlier, well, not earlier this month, but actually at the very end of last month on August 31st, the director of the Office of Special Education Programs, Lori Vanderploeg, and the commissioner of VR, our Rehabilitation Services Administration, Mark Schultz, they co-authored a letter that went out that really encouraged that coordinated efforts together, that schools and VR, we need to be working together, and we need to be starting earlier with these interventions with youth to build up those expectations and to have that high level of support for them. So I think that we can even put maybe a link to that letter in this chat, so people can go back to your communities. And really, this is coming from the top federal level, and it needs to go down to the teachers and the VR counselors working in the field, coordinating together. We need to have that structure of support across all levels of the work that we're doing together. And it really does make it so we're not duplicating services, that we're supporting each other, and we know what we're both doing. So we're not going to be working against each other. We're actually going to be collaborating with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And thank you for bringing up that resource. I did see that they put it in the chat, the transition guide, which also does reference the guideposts in there as well. So, I mean, you see this interconnection of themes. I really do feel like there's a great inertia in our country around this topic, and I'm beginning to see that synergy happening at the federal level in a way that I just haven't seen before in my career. I'm seeing it happening at all these states levels. It's exciting to see what the future holds. I think Representative Cutler, you might also have something you want to add to this.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So yeah, a couple of things I wanted to follow up. One is, I think you mentioned earlier, disability and the recognition that they give to some employers. We've been working on something in Massachusetts, recognizing that for smaller employers that aren't maybe part of that or can't necessarily meet some of the metrics involved there, that we want to find a way to recognize them, because there's obviously a vast number of smaller, mid-sized businesses. So we're working with a local organization to do something sort of similar on a smaller scale, which I think is important. That was one thing I want to mention. Also, in Massachusetts, we've just partnered with Mass Rehab, which is the Mass Rehab Commission, to do an internship program literally at the State House, to bring in their clients to serve as interns at the State House, where we make policy. And that's taking a little bit of a hit because of COVID, but we're very much crossing our fingers that we can still make that work once things are past this. So creating that internship program, the link, the pipeline, I think is important. Obviously to the business community, but also as a policymaker, having that in our literal building when we're making policy, so we're make sure that top of mind awareness is there. So those are a couple of things we're doing. And one last thing I'll throw out is legislation that we're trying to pass here in Massachusetts to create a permanent commission to address that issue you talked about coordination between the different agencies. We have a lot of different stakeholders and a lot of different groups doing good work in this space, and so we're trying to get a permanent commission set up that would bring in folks from the executive branch. We have a great working relationship with Governor Baker and his team, and also include leaders in the legislative branch and the nonprofit space. So that's something we're trying to do in Massachusetts as well.
That's great. That's a wonderful best practice. So last question, and I'll ask you guys if you have a comment to keep it to the 60-second elevator speech, because I know we're running low on time. But if you had one tidbit and you were in the elevator with somebody that said, "Hey, how can I improve transition outcomes or programming in my state?" What would you tell them? Do you guys have that 30-second, 60-second piece of advice that you might tell somebody quickly?
I'll just say very quickly, as a legislator, get to know your legislator. They're not scary. They're nice people. They want to hear from you, and don't wait for an emergency to exchange business cards. So get to know them, go to their office hours, give them a call, whatever you need to do, because when it comes time to be doing crafting policy on this issue, you want them to have that personal connection. Great.
Thank you. That's invaluable advice. I think we too often don't take that to heart and engage in conversation when we all could be doing that. So thank you for that. Keith, Brandy, any final comments before we I'll pass it back over to Sydney for the closing remarks.
I would say that the best way to make sure that all of our students with disabilities and individuals with disabilities themselves is to make sure that these individuals are in contact with VR, and that collaboration between our school systems and VR. We're working really hard in Florida to develop that and to keep developing it. But I believe that it's vital to the success of our students to make sure that we have a platform, a bridge for them to cross over with.
Great. Yeah, very, very true. Keith,
Yeah.
any final words?
Sure. I would just say the question we have to ask ourselves is how do we create these opportunities? Not if these students can benefit from them, it's how we create the opportunity. So this is work we have to do. We just have to figure out how to do it. Is it collaborating with schools, employers, centers for independent living? We have to have everybody engaged in this. It's how we're going to do it. It's not if they can benefit from it. They will, they can do it. We just have to figure out how.
Great. Thank you. Thank you to all of you. I really appreciate the dialogue. It's been rich. I feel like I could keep talking to all of you for much longer than we have allocated here today, which I'm sure our conversations will continue beyond this space. But I really appreciate you guys taking your time to come and speak with all of us today and have this dialogue. I'll turn it over to Sydney Geiger to close this out for today and give us the final send-off. So, Sydney?
I just wanted to thank you again so much to our speakers and to our moderator, Andrew. Such great content, and remind everyone that this will be up on our website as well. And as a part of this ADA series, we do have a couple more webinars coming up, and they are on the screen now. You can also find them at seed.csg.org, where you can learn more about each webinar and register there. And you can receive a certificate of completion for any of our webinars, and our next event will be eligible for CRC certificate credits. So just wanted to share that. If we can go on to the next slide. A couple more things, and then I'll pass it over to our partners at ODEP to close this out for today. Just want to go ahead and provide our contact information here. As always, we would love to hear from you. Happy to assist you in any way as you move forward on implementing any of the guideposts in your state. And we'd love to hear from you, and you can reach any of us here. And then a quick announcement, if we go on, wanted to take this time to remind you that October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month. And this year's theme is increasing access and opportunity. We'd love for you to celebrate with us. And for more information, you can visit dol.gov/ND. And one more thing before I close this out for today and pass it over to our colleagues at ODEP, I want to bring your attention to the Workforce Recruitment Program. WRP connects federal agencies with students and recent graduates with disabilities seeking internships and postgraduate employment. It's a really great program. It focuses on federal government as a model employer, but the private sector and state government also can utilize it. So learn more at wrp.gov. And on the next slide, I'll go ahead and give one last thank you to everyone who attended today, and all of our speakers and our partners at the State Exchange on Employment and Disability, as well as the Cape Youth Center. We're just so glad to have everybody today. I hope you've all learned something, and really appreciate everyone who's made this possible. I'm going to kick it over to Kirk Liu, who is a Senior Policy Advisor for the Youth Policy Project, Cape Youth, from the Office of Disability Employment Policy. So he'll be wrapping up Assistant Secretary Sheehy's comments from earlier and giving us a closeout. We work very closely with Kirk, and we're so honored to have him here to close us out. So Kirk, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Sydney. And I just wanted to thank everyone for participating and having a chance to hear about this exciting work and how the Guidepost has evolved over the past 17 years. As Deputy Assistant Secretary Sheehy mentioned, this has been a labor of love for ODEP. ODEP recognizes, as well as the Department of Labor, recognizes the importance of being involved in youth transition, especially the transition of youth with disabilities. But we understand that the Guidepost is always evolving. It's always changing. It's always being able to be considered to grow as a framework. And that's some of the things that we've been able to do over the past few years, since 2016, and looking at revising the Guideposts. We are excited because we are really embarking on a new initiative to really look at the Guideposts as a framework, as you have heard, as a framework that really brings policy and practice together. You know, I wanted to just mention that some of what our speakers said from UMass, it was interesting to hear that they are looking to put together, you know, stakeholders from all different systems to really look at youth transition in a comprehensive and holistic way, which the Guidepost allows us to do that. Oregon and their family engagement piece, understanding the importance of family engagement, understanding how important it is for families to understand benefits counseling, financial literacy, understanding how they can help their young people manage that transition from post to post-secondary or employment settings is always going to be important. And our speaker from Florida did a great job of explaining the importance of mentors, how important it is as we make these transitions for young people who are doing this on their own sometimes or with very little support, but the importance of a mentor to help you along the way is always going to be important. But be always considering that within a framework, all of these things are being considered. It's helping our partners understand how all these issues, all these concerns, all of the different guideposts work together. So we appreciate the work that the center is doing. We appreciate where we're moving the guideposts to, and we appreciate this webinar because it gives us an opportunity to see where policy and practice actually meet so that we can continue to provide states and local areas with the information to help them better, help young people make better employment outcomes and better transition outcomes. So with that, I just wanted to thank all our speakers, thank Cape Youth, our partners, our grantee partners, for all their hard work, and we look forward to presenting to you guys in the future. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kirk. And thank you so much again to our speakers and everyone who attended. If you have any questions or would like any further information, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to share the Guidepost document with you and talk more in depth with you one-on-one. So hopefully we will talk with you soon. I hope you have a great afternoon and hopefully a good weekend coming up. So thank you all so much and have a good day.